I heard them before I even set down my purse. My daughter-in-law's voice carried through the hallway the way it always did, like she'd never once considered that sound travels. I had come in through the side door, the one that sticks in November because the wood swells with the cold. I had come in quietly, not out of any intention, just habit. 63 years of living alone after my husband passed will do that to a person. You stop making noise. Nobody is listening anyway. She's going to make it weird, my daughter-in-law said. She always makes it weird. I stood in the hallway with my coat still on and one glove in my hand. It's Thanksgiving, my son said, not defending me, just stating the holiday like it was an inconvenience on the calendar. Every year, she said. Every single year something happens. Either she cries at the table or she brings up your father or she says something to the kids. I love her, Marcus. I do. But can we have one normal Thanksgiving? Just one? There was a pause. I'll talk to her, Marcus said. No, don't. That'll make it worse. She lowered her voice, which was almost funny. Can you just tell her we're doing something small this year, like immediate family only? Immediate family. I had nursed Marcus through pneumonia when he was 7 years old. I had slept in a chair beside his hospital bed for 4 nights. I had driven him to every baseball practice in a town where the fields were 30 minutes from our house, and I had never once complained about the gas money, even when it hurt. I had worn the same winter coat for 11 years so that Marcus could go on his 8th grade class trip to Washington, D.C. I had given him the down payment on the house I was standing in. I had signed the check myself and told him it was his father's life insurance and he should use it for something that would last. I was not immediate family. I pulled off my other glove. I folded both of them together the way I always did. I set them on the little table by the side door, the one I had refinished for them as a housewarming gift, and I walked back out into the cold without saying a word. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the entire time. Not because I was in a hurry. I just needed something to look at that wasn't the road. When I got home, I put the kettle on. I sat at my kitchen table. I looked at the window over the sink where I'd hung a little string of orange lights for the season because my granddaughter Lily had asked me to last October when she came to stay for a weekend. She was 9. She had stood on one of my kitchen chairs to reach the curtain rod, and she had said, "Grandma Ruth, your house needs to look like a holiday." I looked at those lights for a long time. I am not a woman who cries easily. My mother raised me in a house where crying was something you did in private, and even then you kept it brief. You were allowed to feel things, she told me. You were not allowed to let feelings make your decisions for you. So I didn't cry. I made my tea. I added a little honey because my throat had felt dry all morning. And then I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator, the one where I keep things I don't look at often. And I took out the notebook. It was just a composition notebook, the black and white kind. I had started it almost by accident years ago when my accountant told me I should keep better records of any financial gifts to family members for tax purposes. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't even comfortable most years. But I had given and given and given because that is what you do. That is what I believed a mother did. I opened the notebook to the first page. It took me a long time to read through it all. The first entry was from 2009. Marcus and his girlfriend at the time, not his wife, a different one, had needed first and last month's rent for an apartment in the city. I had given them $2,400. I had done it without being asked twice. I had done it the way my own mother had helped me when I was young. Because someone has to be the one who holds things together when they start to fall apart. They broke up 6 months later, and Marcus moved back home for a year. I fed him that year. I washed his clothes. I let him grieve his relationship in the spare bedroom while I paid the utilities alone on a retired teacher's pension and said nothing about it. He met his wife Dana 2 years after that. I liked Dana at first. She was sharp and quick. And she laughed at things that were actually funny, not just polite. She had a good job. She kept an organized home. I respected organized people. The problems started small, the way they always do. The first Christmas she came to my house, she just mentioned, she said, that she wasn't really a fan of the way I made stuffing. Too dry, she thought. Maybe next year I could try the recipe her mother used, which had Italian sausage in it. I said, of course, and I smiled, and I thought, this is just the first year. Couples take time to find their way. But it was never just the first year. The second year, she said she thought the kids would rather open presents before dinner, not after. I had always done after dinner. My mother had done after dinner. It was how you built the anticipation, how you made the meal feel like part of the celebration rather than an obstacle before the gifts. I agreed to before dinner. The kids tore open their presents and forgot about them before I even got the turkey on the table. The third year, Dana's mother started coming. That was fine. I had no objection to that. But her mother sat at the opposite end of the table from me, and I spent that entire Thanksgiving feeling like a guest in my own son's home, which I had furnished, piece by piece, from the inheritance money and my own retirement savings. I looked at the notebook page by page. $800 when Marcus's car needed a transmission. $1,200 for the emergency room bill when my grandson Derek broke his arm at soccer camp. They didn't have the money right then. I had it, barely, and I gave it. The months I watched the children, Derek and Lily, every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years, without pay, without complaint, because Dana had gone back to work and daycare would have cost them more than they could manage. I was 61 years old and I drove 40 minutes each way, and I never once said this is hard on me. Because it wasn't, not really. Those kids were my joy. Lily used to fall asleep on my shoulder during the afternoon cartoons, and I would sit perfectly still for an hour just to avoid waking her. I turned the pages. The down payment on the house, $27,000. It was nearly everything I had from Harold's life insurance. I'd kept some back for my own emergencies because I am not a foolish woman. But I'd given most of it freely and with love and without any expectation that I would ever see it again. I had not expected gratitude every day. I didn't need a monument. I thought I was family. I closed the notebook and sat for a while in the quiet. My house is not large. 2 bedrooms, one of which I use as a sewing room now. A kitchen that I have kept the same since 1987 because I know where everything is and I see no reason to change what works. A living room with Harold's old chair that I still cannot bring myself to move, even though it blocks the natural path to the hallway and my physical therapist has mentioned it twice. I had always imagined that when I was old, really old, there would be people in this house. Not every day. I was not naive about that, but that there would be a reason to cook a full meal sometimes and someone to share it with. That the grandchildren would want to come. That I would be, if nothing else, needed. I picked up my phone. I looked at it for a moment. Then I put it back down. There was nothing to say that evening. I needed to think first. My mother's voice, somewhere in the back of my head, you are not allowed to let feelings make your decisions for you. I made a second cup of tea. I sat in Harold's chair. I thought about Thanksgiving, about what I actually wanted, about what I had allowed to happen to me so slowly that I hadn't even noticed it happening. And then I thought about the notebook. The next morning, I drove to the office supply store, and I bought 12 envelopes. The good kind, the heavy cream-colored ones that feel like they mean something when you hold them. I bought a box of thank you cards, blank inside with a simple border, nothing fussy. I drove home. I sat down at my kitchen table, and I began to write. I did not write anything angry. I was very deliberate about that. Anger is loud and easy, and it lets the other person make you into the villain. I had watched Dana do that for years. Take a situation that was really about her and reshape it until somehow I was the problem. I was not going to give her or Marcus that satisfaction. I wrote facts. On each card, I wrote to one person, Marcus, Dana, and then a card for my grandchildren together, which I put aside for later because I needed to think about that one more carefully. To Marcus, I wrote, I love you. I have always loved you, even when it was not easy, even when you made it hard. I want you to know that I am not angry. I am simply finished being somewhere I am not welcome. I hope you'll think, sometime, about what it cost me to make sure you had what you needed and what it costs me now to let you find your way without me. I am not leaving your life. I am leaving the table. I stopped and read that back. I changed a few words. Then I sealed it. To Dana, I wrote something shorter. I thanked her for the years she had allowed me to be part of the children's lives. I told her I had always respected the home she kept and the mother she was. I meant both of those things. You can be hurt by someone and still tell the truth about their good qualities. That is not weakness. That is accuracy. And I told her quietly, near the end of the card, that I hoped she would raise Lily to know her own worth early, so she wouldn't have to learn it at 68. That line I did not change. I sealed that one too. The children's card took me the longest. Lily was 9. Derek was 12. They didn't know about any of this, and they shouldn't. Children should not be handed the weight of adult mistakes. So I wrote them a card that said only, I love you both more than you will ever fully know, and my door is always open, and I have saved every drawing you ever gave me, and when you are older and you want to come see your grandmother, I will be here, always. I meant that most of all. Thanksgiving morning I woke up early. I made coffee. I stood at the window in my kitchen and I watched the neighborhood get light. My street is quiet in the mornings, especially in November when people leave later because of the cold. The Hendersons' dog was out in their yard, sniffing around the frost in the grass. A minivan went by with a rack of luggage on top, someone heading somewhere for the holiday. I had been invited, technically. Marcus had called 2 days earlier, a stiff, short call where he said they were having a small gathering, and of course I should come. He did not sound like he meant it. He sounded like Dana was nearby. I told him I had other plans. He paused. What plans? I told him I was having dinner with my friend Carolyn and her husband who were in from Savannah. This was true. Carolyn had invited me a month ago and I had said I would have to check because I'd assumed I would be at Marcus's. Now I called her back and I said I was coming, and she sounded so genuinely pleased that something in my chest loosened in a way I hadn't expected. I made a sweet potato pie to bring to Carolyn's. I made it from scratch, the way my mother taught me, with real vanilla and a touch of cardamom that most recipes don't call for, but that makes all the difference. I wore the blue dress I bought last spring that I had not yet had occasion to wear. I put on Harold's favorite earrings, the small gold ones that I usually saved for church. I looked at myself in the mirror in the hallway before I left. I looked like a woman who was going somewhere she was wanted. Carolyn's house smelled like rosemary and wood smoke when I arrived. She hugged me at the door for a long moment and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Her husband Ray took my coat and told me I looked wonderful, and he's a man who has never once in 30 years said something he didn't mean, so I believed him. There were other people there. A neighbor couple I didn't know well, a young woman named Priya, who taught at the university, Carolyn's sister visiting from Tampa. It was easy. It was warm. Nobody needed anything from me except my company, which I gave freely, and in return I was given food and laughter and the specific comfort of being in a room where people are glad you showed up. At one point, Carolyn's sister asked me how many children I had, and I said 1 son, and she asked if he was nearby for the holiday, and I said he has his own family to be with. And I smiled when I said it, and it was true, and that was all it needed to be. We sat at the table for 3 hours. I ate well. I told stories about Harold that I hadn't told in years because I usually felt like I was being indulged when I brought him up. Carolyn listened the way a real friend listens, like she was actually interested and not just waiting for her turn to speak. I told the one about the time Harold tried to fix the gutters himself and came down off the ladder with a bird's nest in his jacket pocket and no clear idea of how it got there. And everyone laughed, and I laughed too. And for a moment, I forgot entirely that I was supposed to be somewhere else. I drove home at 8 o'clock. The streets were quiet. I took the long way. The envelope I had written to Marcus and Dana, I mailed the following Monday. I had kept them for almost a week, rereading them, making sure I had said what I meant to say and not more. I added one more line to Marcus's card before I sealed it for the last time. I want you to know that I'm not asking for anything. I'm not waiting for an apology. I am simply telling you the truth, the way parents and children should be able to do, and then I am going to go live my life as well as I know how. I did not include the notebook. I thought about it, but the notebook was mine. It was my record, my memory, my accounting of things given. I did not need them to know every number. I did not need the debt acknowledged. I just needed to stop pretending that the debt didn't exist, even if only to myself. I dropped the envelopes into the mailbox on the corner of Hartwell and 6th, the blue one that has been there since before Marcus was born. I stood there for a second after I let go of them, hand in the slot, the metal cold through my glove. Then I let go. Marcus called on a Wednesday, about 10 days later. I let it ring. He called again the next morning, and this time I answered. He didn't shout. I'll give him that. His voice was careful, the way it gets when he's trying to manage a situation. He said he'd gotten my card. He said he wasn't sure what I meant by some of it. He said he thought I was blowing things out of proportion. I let him finish. Then I said, I heard you and Dana talking in the front room when I came in through the side door on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. I heard everything. I didn't say anything that night because I needed time to think. And what I thought is that I have spent a very long time making myself smaller so that everyone around me could feel more comfortable. I'm not willing to do that anymore. He was quiet. I said, I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm not asking you to apologize if you don't mean it. I'm asking you to understand that I'm a person and I've always been your mother, and I'd like both of those things to be true at the same table at the same time. If that's possible, I'm here. If it's not, I understand that too. He said, Mom, just that. Just my name, in the voice he had at 9 years old, before he learned to be careful with me. I said, I know, sweetheart. We talked for a while longer. I don't need to account for everything that was said. Some things belong inside a phone call, but when I hung up, I sat in Harold's chair and I looked at the sewing room doorway and I thought, I don't know how this ends. I genuinely don't. And for the first time in, I can't remember how long, that felt all right. Lily called me the following Saturday, out of nowhere, to tell me that her class was doing a project on community helpers, and she had chosen to write about retired teachers, and could she ask me some questions? I said, of course you can. Come over. She came Sunday afternoon, just her, which doesn't happen often. She sat at my kitchen table with a green notebook and a purple pen, and she asked me very serious questions about what it was like to be a teacher, and whether I had liked my students, and if I had ever had a student who was really hard to reach. I answered every question. At the end, she looked up from her notebook and she said, Grandma Ruth, was being a teacher your favorite thing you ever did? I thought about it honestly, the way she deserved. I said, it was one of my favorite things. But raising your dad was another. And being your grandma is another. And being your grandma is another. I have had the good fortune of having more than one favorite thing. She wrote that down, verbatim, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. I made us cocoa afterward, and she stayed until her mother came to pick her up. When Dana knocked on the door and came inside, she looked at me for a moment, and something passed across her face that wasn't quite an apology, but wasn't nothing either. She said, thank you for having her. And she said it like she meant it. I said, she's always welcome. She knows that. Dana nodded. She gathered Lily's coat and notebook and purple pen. At the door, she turned back and said, the card. And then she stopped. I waited. She said, I've been thinking about it. I said, that's all I asked. I don't know what happens next. That's the truth of it. I am 68 years old and I have learned, in the long way you only learn things you don't want to learn, that I cannot control what other people decide to do with the truth once they have it. Marcus may change. Dana may or may not become someone who sees me as a person first and an inconvenience second. The holidays will come and go, and some years I will be at that table and some years I may not. But I will be somewhere warm. I know that now. I will be somewhere with people who are glad I walked through the door. I put new batteries in the orange lights above my kitchen sink, the ones Lily helped me hang. I bought a proper table runner for my dining room. The kind I've been meaning to get for years and kept putting off because it felt like too much effort for just me. I started calling Carolyn on Thursday evenings for no particular reason, just to talk, the way women of our mother's generation understood you were supposed to do. I signed up, finally, for the Thursday watercolor class at the community center. I had been meaning to go for 2 years. I had been putting it off because I thought Thursdays might be needed for something else, for someone else. My first day there, the instructor, a small woman named Bev, who wore paint-stained overalls and bifocals, handed me a brush and said, "Don't try to control it too much. Let the water do some of the work." I thought about that for a long time, longer than she probably intended. I painted something that looked a little like the view from my kitchen window. The frost on the grass, the neighbor's dog, the early light coming gray and then gold over the roof of the house across the street. It wasn't perfect. It was mine. I brought it home and I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet, the way I used to put up Lily's drawings, the way someone used to put up mine when I was small enough to think that everything I made was worth saving. It still is. I'm still here,